What's going on, y'all? It's Drew. We're back with another NBA video, and today we're going to be talking about Cooper Flagg, because I have been probably higher on Cooper Flagg than I have been on any prospect in my tenure as an NBA fan. I've really planted my flag in the ground about how good I think he's going to be. I think Cooper Flagg is going to be amazing. And today I just wanted to talk about the teams that are going to be competing for him in the lottery, where I'd like to see him end up, where I wouldn't like to see him end up. Charlotte. And I just want to talk about how amazing this kid is, because I think he is going to be a generational prospect and one of the best players in the NBA pretty soon. So let's just get into it. If you guys like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by around June. Might adjust that goal a little bit. Maybe try to get to 100,000 total views on the channel by June. We're definitely on pace for that. Every like, every sub, it really counts a lot. We got a Twitch and a Discord in the bio if you guys want to check those out. But let's just get into this video. So talk about Cooper Flagg first before we get into the destinations for him. A lot of people maybe have some mixed opinions about Cooper Flagg. When you look at his build, when you look at his attributes, if I were to describe him to you, he doesn't seem like a player who's generational in any one aspect. But in my opinion, Cooper Flagg is so versatile, and his mentality is such that I believe he is going to be one of the best players in the NBA in 5 years. My prediction for him is that in 5 years, he will be an MVP candidate, and he will be a dominant first-team All-NBA caliber forward, and his team will be probably very good by then. He is a unbelievable defensive prospect, 6'9", great hands, great length, great athleticism. He blocks shots at a high rate. He reads passing lanes well. He's a very high IQ player, and all those things lead to him being a very good defensive player. He also really puts in a lot of effort on the defensive end for a guy who also leads his team on offense as well. He really does hang his hat on both ends of the court. So that's one thing. It's very rare to find a player who's so driven on both sides of the basketball and just has that hunger, that mentality that I'm really looking for in a generational prospect. I look at him in the same way that I view like a Victor Wembanyama in that regard. Probably my favorite thing about Vic is, other than the fact that he is a fucking alien and the fact that he literally does everything, his mentality is so cool. It's so cool to see a player so young who's so hungry that he's willing to try in the All-Star game and get really fired up about every single game and get really, really competitive. It's very rare to see that in a number one pick, in my opinion. If you look through the other ones through the last few years, it's really not the same. Bro, I swear to God, Cooper Flagg has that. I'm obviously not in his head. You know, I'm not a psychologist. I just get that vibe. That's probably my favorite thing about him. Talk about his offense, and he's not a perfect offensive player by any means. There are some holes in his game that I think will be exploited at the next level. Primarily the fact that he doesn't have the biggest frame yet. He does need to fill out a little bit if he wants to handle NBA physicality. This is not like a remarkable criticism at all. This is true of a lot of forwards when they come into the NBA. And if you look at like an Ace Bailey in this draft, he's probably going to have similar issues. But Cooper Flagg is so good at so many things on offense. He's got a solid handle, and because he's 6'9", he's really hard to stay in front of because he's got that killer athleticism. He's explosive, and he can rise over and shoot over the top of any defender. And when you pair that with that athleticism, it makes him a very versatile 3-level scorer. He's a good 3-point shooter. Like his numbers from college are like actually pretty good. I believe he shoots like 5.5 attempts on like 36 or 37%, maybe a little bit lower than that. But he is a good 3-point shooter in my opinion, and I think in time he could be a very, very, very good 3-point shooter. Got a good mid-range game. Again, he gets to the rim with vicious, ferocious aggression. He goes through multiple defenders and he dunks everything. It's awesome. Probably my favorite thing about his offensive game is that he is not a shot chucker. He is a natural born passer. He likes to make plays. When you look at him, he's not like a generational passing prospect. He's not a guy who makes flashy passes, but very rarely do I see him make like incorrect reads. Very rarely do I see him do dumb shit with the basketball. And honestly, that's the biggest thing for him for me, is the fact that he can be probably a secondary or even primary playmaker on the court for a lot of teams. He's a very natural passer. He loves to make plays out of the pick and roll. He can whip the ball across the gym and find open teammates. And because, again, he has a great frame, all those things sort of lend to his passing being even better. So I think Cooper Flagg is going to be a guy who at the next level averages in the high 20s in points. He averages close to 8 rebounds a game, maybe even up to 10, and he's like a 5 to 6 assist guy as well. The long-term outlook for him is, in my opinion, very good, and in my opinion, he is a can't-miss prospect. He's fucking good. And a lot of people don't think he's generational. I know that like Pierre on the Numbers on the Board podcast said that he doesn't really buy that he's a generational prospect. I think if you are not taking him number 1 overall and anticipating to get a superstar, you're just incorrect. Like, I think he is going to be that guy. I think he is going to be a problem. So that's my 5 minutes on Cooper Flagg. Let's talk about where he's going to go now. The lottery, obviously, now that it's been smoothed out, it gives a lot of teams the opportunity to jump up and go get the number 1 pick in this year's draft. The bottom 3 teams right now are Charlotte, Washington, and Utah. I'd be very surprised if any of them slid out of that bottom 3. It looks pretty down pat at this point. Then you've got New Orleans, Toronto, Brooklyn, and Philadelphia in that second tier. It looks like Philadelphia could fall as far as 5, maybe even 4th in this draft in terms of odds, and it's very important that they do, because if they go lower than 6th, then OKC is getting their fucking draft pick, which would be horrific for the state of the league right now, especially if OKC wins a title. Getting another lottery pick to add to their stockpile of lottery picks and young talent would be ridiculous. But let's just talk about these bottom 3 teams first. Washington is probably my second favorite destination for Cooper Flagg. Initially, I thought they'd be my favorite, but I actually probably prefer Utah. We'll get to them in a minute. I like Washington because, first of all, they don't really have a guy on the roster. If Cooper Flagg ends up on this team, you know he's going to be the franchise player out the gate. They have some good infrastructure already. They have some good veterans. They have some young talent. I like Keyshawn George. I like Corey Kispert. I like Bilal Coulibaly. Bob Carrington's been pretty damn good this year. And then again, they've got some vets. You know, you've got Malcolm Brogdon. You've got Marcus Smart, Christopher James, Cash Money Middleton. Alex Sarr has been pretty not amazing this year, but he's an extremely raw talent, and I think in theory the idea of a Sarr Flagg front court is very, very intriguing to me. It lacks a lot of size. Sarr is 7 feet tall and weighs the same amount as Cooper Flagg, I believe, which is wild, and Cooper Flagg is already undersized, so they'd need to go get like an iHeart sort of player to kind of bolster that front court, but I think that could be a really good fit for him. They also could probably use some more playmaking. These guards that they have are sort of loose cannons a little bit, and they're also really young. I think Cooper Flagg would be a really good stabilizer for them, and in time that could be a very, very good team. But they're not my favorite for him, just because Washington doesn't really have an amazing track record of, you know, cultivating amazing young talents. They were very good when like John Wall was there, but they haven't been really anything more than a dumpster fire in a few years. Charlotte, who is the second worst team in the NBA right now, I think would actually be worse though. And it's not necessarily that I have good logistical reasons as to why he would be worse in Charlotte. By all accounts, the Hornets have actually done okay in the last couple years, sort of fixing the mess that the previous regime left over. I believe they got a new front office last year, or the year they drafted Brandon Miller, and I don't hate most of the decisions they've made. Obviously, Salon has been pretty bad for them this year, but like honestly, the Hornets, they just got really, really unlucky this year with injuries. But that's like part of the concern for me. Like, I don't know if there's something in the water in Charlotte, but it just feels like every single time they get a good player now, they can never stay healthy. And also, I feel like the good players they have on that team, it doesn't feel like a stable nucleus to like a good team at all. They already have their franchise player in LaMelo Ball, who's a loose cannon himself. And this is coming from me, who is a massive LaMelo Ball defender. Miles Bridges is another loose cannon. Pretty much all their young guys like are like they are literally like all have a criminal record. I just like to see him land somewhere where the infrastructure feels more stable. Charlotte has just been a disaster for so goddamn long. It feels like ages ago since they had Kemba Walker and were just like not that great instead of very, very, very fucking bad. The Charlotte Hornets have historically never been a very stable team. I'd like to see Cooper Flagg end up somewhere, get given the keys to the franchise for one, and two, not have to worry about like all the bullshit that's happening with the Hornets. There's an 86% chance they don't get the first pick in the draft, so I'm not super worried about it, but they have the same odds as the Wizards and the Jazz, so I'm a little bit freaked out about it. If Charlotte wins the lottery this year, I'm gonna be pretty upset. Utah is probably my favorite destination for Cooper Flagg, but I like Utah because one, they have a great mix of young players and some veterans. You've got Larry Markkinen, you've got Colin Sexton, these guys that A, can be moved around if you want to. They have a ton of flexibility in this offseason, and B, these are like actually like good vets, and they sort of fit a timeline. They've got some good young players. Keontae George, I'm not really sure what his ceiling is. I feel like he's too much of a score-first guard to be an elite primary, playmaking one in this league. I like Taylor Hendricks. Really sucks that he broke his leg in like the first game of the season. Cody Williams has been really bad this year, but fortunately that's kind of been made up for by the fact that Kyle Filipowski and especially Isaiah Collier have been pretty badass for the Jazz this year. They've got a ton of young talent here. We really don't know what any of it looks like. I like the way they're coached. I like Will Hardy. He seems like a cool guy, seems like a good leader. So I think this would be a great landing spot for him. It's also cool because Flagg never struck me as a guy who loves the spotlight as much. Utah is not really like a big market, so it does kind of seem like the perfect place for him. Washington is also cool because you get, like, if he goes to Washington, he's the president. Like, that nickname is just set in stone already. He doesn't really get a cool nickname if he goes to Utah, but the Jazz have a pretty good infrastructure here. I think their front office is a lot more competent. Oh, and the other thing about the Jazz is they have like a ton of assets. Like, they have so many picks out in the future from the Mitchell and Gobert trades. They've done a really good job managing their assets so far. So if he goes there, like, Washington doesn't really have any extra shit. Like, they have some extra shit, but I even think they have outstanding picks even that are just like heavily protected. So they don't really have the infrastructure to immediately build something badass around him. Utah does have that, so I really like him in there. New Orleans would be pretty cool. Obviously, New Orleans gets hit by the injury bug more than like any team in the NBA. I'd be a little bit fearful for that reason, but like on the whole, I think they have pretty good infrastructure. It'd be very interesting to see him and Zion paired together. I think it'd kind of give like Brandon Ingram plus Zion vibes, just in the way that they'd operate as like a playmaking duo. Like, I would say he's a similar level of passer Cooper Flagg is to like Brandon Ingram right now, who's in my opinion a really underrated passer. So I think that fit would work out of the gate. I'm just curious to see. It's very hard to predict any team with Zion on it, like in the long term. So I'm not really sure what that would look like, but I definitely think it's interesting, and they have some assets to work with for sure, and some other good young talent. I think Trey Murphy would be a great fit with him. Toronto would be so funny. Oh my god, if you went to Toronto, that'd be hilarious. This is like Masai Ujiri's wet dream, getting another 6'9" versatile forward who defends at a high level. He's literally just collecting the same players over and over again. I literally just mentioned Brandon Ingram, and obviously they've got Scotty Barnes. They just draft the same player every year, it feels like. So I think it'd be a little redundant. I hope that Toronto doesn't get the first pick in the draft, but I mean, if they do, I'd be pretty hyped because I live like an hour from the arena. Brooklyn might be my favorite landing spot for Flagg. They have a good treasure trove of assets to work with, a lot of okay young talent, and a ton of vets. They can really mix up how they want to make this thing happen, and I honestly just think Brooklyn is a vibe in the way that Utah and Washington aren't. They were really good a few years ago. They have cool jerseys every now and then. I just sort of like that fit for him a little bit more, just aesthetically. I think Utah, now that I've sort of talked my way through it, would probably be the best fit for him, just in terms of the infrastructure they already have. But Brooklyn is probably a second or third place in that regard for me. And him being in the Eastern Conference rather than the West would, I think, probably be a little bit more interesting in the long term. Brooklyn's also a bigger market, so they can get guys to put around him quite easily. They have a pretty good front office, in my opinion. I think Sean Marks has done a pretty damn good job, although they do like handicap themselves every once in a while by trying to make super teams for no fucking reason. But I think Brooklyn would definitely be interesting. I don't even know what to say if Philadelphia gets him. That would require a whole video in itself if Philadelphia gets the opportunity to reset their franchise with Cooper Flagg. So I'm not really sure what that would look like. Chicago would be awesome. They obviously need a number one option, but they suck so badly at developing young talent. I don't even think they could screw this one up, but like they just can never build, they would never be able to build them a supporting cast, I don't think, with the way the team is currently constructed and with their management as of now. San Antonio would break my brain. I don't think that should be legal, but it is a possibility. They have about a 5% chance, so that would be pretty bad for the rest of the league if you paired Wemby and Flagg. I don't think I need to explain why. That defense would just be ironclad. Portland would be badass. They already have a strong defensive identity. They're pretty well coached, it seems like. I think the jury is sort of still out on whether or not Chauncey Billups is a great head coach, but I don't think he's like the worst head coach in the NBA, which was sort of like the mantra the last few years. They have a strong defensive identity. They have guards already. They have some vets, a lot of flexibility. So I think Portland would probably be like a top 3 or 4 destination for him. Everyone else in the lottery is pretty much a wash. So yeah, those are pretty much my favorite landing spots for Flagg. I like Utah, probably the best. Then I'd go Brooklyn, and it's completely unrealistic, but Portland or Chicago would probably be not bad. Charlotte would piss me off so much. Washington would be fine, really no complaints if Washington wins the draft lottery. And Toronto would be hilarious. But that's going to do it for me. If you guys like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think of Cooper Flagg in the comments. I'm very curious to see what the general consensus is about him. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Cue that music.